We continue now at the top of Daf Dalet Amud Beis in Meseches Sotah. This is Sotah Daf 4b. On the previous summit, the Gemara quoted the opinion that the amount of time of stira, of seclusion, is the amount of time it takes to take bread out of a basket. And the Gemara continues to question, b'dechitio, b'tisari, what kind of bread are we talking about? Is it made out of wheat or is it made out of barley? Rashi says, b'dechitio, b'tisari, shalchit and cholak, v'nishmat yoser mishal sa'orim. When it comes to wheat, it's smoother and it's harder to take out. Barley will come out faster. B'rechicho, b'akusha, is it soft bread or is it harder bread? And Rashi says, Rechicha, again, Nishmat Yosem Yakush, it slips more than the harder bread, it's more difficult to take out. And the Gemara says, the Gemara leaves all of these questions as questions. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, Amar Rav Yochanan, Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef says that Rav Yochanan says, Kol echad v'echad ba'atzmo shir, all of these different opinions in terms of how long is the act of relations, each Tana was actually going by how long it took him. And the Gemara says, what do you mean? Vayika ben Azai, but wasn't there the opinion of Ben Azai earlier? The lo nasav, and Ben Azai wasn't married. So what do you mean? He couldn't be speaking from personal experience. And the Gemara says, if you want, we could say that he actually did get married, but then he separated from his wife. If you want, we could say another answer, he heard this shir from his Rebbe. And if you want, we could say a third answer, Sod Hashem Lireyav, that the secrets of Hashem are to those who fear him. Even though he had no personal experience, he was able to understand how long it took anyhow. And the Gemara continues, Darash Rav Avira Darshan, Zimnin Amar La Mishmei de Rabbi Ami, V'Zimnin Amar La Mishmei de Rabbi Asi. Sometimes he said it in the name of Rabbi Ami, and sometimes he said it in the name of Rabbi Asi. Kol ha'ochel lechem below netilas yadayim, anybody who eats bread without washing the hands, Ki'ilu ba'al isha zona, it's like having relations with a zona. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, Ki ba'ad isha zona, because on account of a zona, ad kikor lechem, the person has brought a loaf of bread. And so again, we understand that to mean it's connecting the idea of netilas yadayim to the zona. Amar Rava says, Hai ba'ad isha zona ad kikor lechem, but if that's your interpretation, so instead of saying, ba'ad isha zona ad kikor lechem, bi'ad kikor lechem ad isha zona mi boile, the pasuk should have reversed it. It should have said, bi'ad kikor lechem ad isha zona, because what he's saying is somebody who eats bread without netilas yadayim, that's like ba'al isha zona. Ela Amar Rava, so the Gemara says, rather Rava says, Kol ha'ba'al isha zona, l'sof mevakesh kikor lechem. What the pasuk actually means is, anybody who has relations with a woman who's a zona, in the end, he will be looking for loaves of bread, meaning to say, he's going to be poor. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Zreika, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Zreika says that Rabbi Elazar says, Kol ha'mezalzel b'netilas yadayim, anybody who treats netilas yadayim with contempt, nekar min ha'olam, will be uprooted from the world. Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi, Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi says that Rav says, Mayim Rishonim, when it comes to Mayim Rishonim, that's the netilas yadayim that you do before you eat, tzarech sheyagbia yadav lamala, the person needs to lift his hands upward. And Mayim Achronim, when it comes to Mayim Achronim, the washing that is done after the meal, tzarech sheyashvil yadav lamata. In that case, the person needs to turn his hands downward. Tanya Nami Hachi, the Gemara says we have a brisa that supports this as well. Hanotel yadav, somebody does netilas yadayim, tzarech sheyagbia yadav lamala, he has to lift his hands up, again talking about Mayim Rishonim, and the reason is Shemayatsu HaMayim Chutz Leperek, we're afraid that maybe the water went outside the area of the joint where he was supposed to be washing, meaning outside the area where the hands are tamei, V'yachzru v'yitamu es yadayim, and then we're afraid that those waters will return, and they're going to be metame, they're going to make his hands impure. And Rashi explains, HaMezalzel she'ochel tamid below netilas yadayim, he treats it with contempt, meaning he eats without doing netilas yadayim. Nakar is uprooted from the world. The overall divrei chachamim chayev misa. Rashi explains, somebody who transgresses the words of the chacham is chayev misa. Techsivu poretz gedish chenu nachash. It says he should be bitten by a snake. Mayim rishonim shelifnei hamazon. Mayim rishonim is the washing before the meal. Sheyagbia yodav. He has to lift up his hands. Rashi etzba'osav, meaning he has to lift up his fingers. Shamayim mishapin letzad zrosav. This way the water will run down towards his arms. Ulekamon mefarish time, and the Gemara will explain the reason later on. And the reason is as follows: Shemayatzu mayim chutz leperek. We're afraid the water is going to leave the area where the washing is required. It's going to travel outside that area, so to speak. V'yachzru v'yitamu es yadayim. Then the water will return and make the hands tamei. K'detanan b'Meseches Yadayim. This is all taught in the Mishnah Meseches Yadayim as follows: Shetzarach litet hamayim al yadav shnei pa'amim. When a person washes mayim rishonim, he has to actually wash his hands twice. Harishonim etarin es yadayim. The first washing, that makes the hands pure. V'hashniyim mitarenes hamayim, and then the second washing, that purifies the water that touched his hands, because that first water became impure. Hatovchem al yadav shenitmu b'tchila machmas yadayim, that water became tamei because of the hands. Utanan hasam, and we learned in the mission over there, hayadayim etamus umataros ad haperek, that it's not the entire arm that is declared tamei, it's really only the hand that's tamei until the joint. Kilomar min haperek ulamata, meaning from the joint of the hand and below, that's the area of the hand that was declared tamei. Gazru alei and lios shnios, there's a decree, it's a gezer midrabanan, that the hands are considered secondary tumah, uposlos esat truma, and if you touch truma with those hands that are tamei, so it disqualifies the truma. Umitaros benatila, and again part of the gezer is that you can make the hands pure by doing the tilas yadayim ad haperek, until the perek, sha'ad haperek, meaning until the joint, sha'ad haperek tzarich netilah, it's until that joint that you require netilas yadayim. And so what happens is as follows: now, if a person does the washing properly the first and second time, and then it returns to the hand, it's tar. Because the second washing purified the first water, so there's no problem. But what happens in the following case? Let's say when he washed the first time, he washed more than he needed to, and it went outside the area where the hands are tamei, so the water traveled a little bit up on the arm. But then the second time he only washes with the exact amount. And then the mayim rishonim, which are tamei, it didn't all get washed because he didn't wash all of it. He only used the exact amount of water on the second washing. So the water that now returns from the mayim rishonim to the hand, tamei, it causes the hand to be tamei. Kilomar yotzu rishonim chutz leperek, meaning again, the mayim rishonim, they went outside the area of where the joint is. And then the second time he washed, he wasn't careful to get all the water from the first time. He just used the minimum amount that was required. And so then the first ones go back to the hand, tamei, it's tamei, because that water became tamei from the hands. And the second washing wasn't able to get all the water from the first. That's why it says over here, he has to lift his fingers upward. We're afraid again, that first water went outside of the area, and then it comes back, and it's going to be metame the hands. And when it comes to the mayim achronim, shalachar suda, when it comes to the water that you're washing after the meal, shechayvu chachamim imnei shemelach stomas yesh shemesame sanayim, there you're trying to actually clean your hands, because we say there is salt of stone that can make a person blind, and you have to clean your hands off from the dirt. So tzarach lahashbel yadav lamat, in that case you should turn your hands downward, kedei sheteir hazuam, but that's in order that the dirt should drip off, shal tav shel shabiyadav, anything that's on his hands should drip off, sharei lahavir hazuam lahim, because that is a different purpose, that's to remove the dirt, and so therefore in that situation you should turn your hands downward. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yavo says, Kala ochel pas below nigov yadayim, anybody who eats bread without drying his hands, wiping his hands, kilu ochel lechem tamei, that's like eating bread that is tamei. The idea is that if a person's hands are wet, so then he ruins the bread, he makes the bread physically repulsive, and that's the same as if it was actually tamei bread. Shenamar, like the pasuk says, Vayomer Hashem kacha yochlu b'nei Yisrael es lachmam tamei v'gomer. Hashem says this is the way b'nei Yisrael, they eat their bread tamei, so you see that repulsive bread is referred to as tamei. And the Gemara continues, Umay ve'eshes ish nefesh yikara tatzud, and this is a reference to the earlier pasuk, the full pasuk again, ki ba'ad isha zona ad kikar lechem, it said, for the sake of an isha zona, until a loaf of bread, ve'eshes ish nefesh yikara tatzud. Then it talks about the adulteress, that she hunts, she captures the nefesh yikara, the precious soul. So what does that part of the pasuk mean? Amr Rabbi Chia bar Abba says, Amr Rabbi Yochanan, the Rabbi Yochanan says, Kol adam sheyesh bo gasas haruach. When it talks about the nefesh yikara, the precious soul, it means somebody who's arrogant. Anybody who is arrogant, levasof nichshal be'eshes ish. In the end, he will stumble in the sin of adultery. Again, that's the context of the pasuk. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, ve'eshes ish nefesh yikara tatzud. That when it comes to the adulteress, she's going to hunt, she's going to capture the precious soul. Amar Rava, so Rava says, Hai nefesh yikara, nefesh gevoa mi boile. So first of all, it shouldn't say nefesh yikara, a precious soul. It should say nefesh gevoa, referring to somebody who is arrogant. Viod he tatzud mi boile. And furthermore, if it's talking about the fact that the arrogant person, he commits this adultery, it should say that the soul, meaning this person, this arrogant person, is the one that's hunting. Elamar Rava, so rather Rava says, he interprets the pasuk as follows, Kol haboal eshes ish afilu lama Torah. Anybody who commits adultery with a married woman, even if he learns Torah, and what does it say about the Torah? It says Yekorahim Ipninim, it says it's precious precious like pearls, and therefore that's the idea of the nefesh yikara. Even if he's yikara, even if he's somebody who learns Torah, mikohen gadol shenichnas lifnai v'lifnim, even more precious than the kohen gadol who enters the holy of holies. He titzudenu, but that sin, that's what it means to say nefesh yikara tatzud. She's going to hunt him. That sin is going to hunt him. It's going to capture him. Ladina shal gehenim. The person will go to justice in Gehenim. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, Kol Adam sheyesh bo gasas haruach, anybody who is arrogant, ki'ilu ovid avodas kochavim, it's as if he's serving idols. Ksivach, it says over here, To'avas Hashem kol gvalev, u'ksiv hasim v'lo tavi to'eva al beisacha. By arrogance it uses the term to'eva, and by avodah zarah it uses the term to'eva, so we see that the two are compared. For Rabbi Yochanan Didei Amar, and Rabbi Yochanan himself says, Ki'ilu kafar be'ikr, it's like denying HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, V'ram levavecha, you're going to get arrogant, V'shachachta es Hashem elokecha v'gomer, and you will forget about Hashem. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Chama bar Chanina Amar, Rabbi Chama bar Chanina says, Ki'ilu ba'al kol ha'arayus. The sin of arrogance, it's the same as transgressing all the sins of arayas. Again, it says by arrogance the word to'avas. And it says over there, by arayas it also uses the same term, and therefore the two are compared. Ula Amar Ki'ilu Bana Bama. Ula says that arrogance is the same as building a bama, that is an altar outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, and this is a pasuk from Yeshayahu that is talking about arrogance. Chidlu lachem in adam asher neshama bi'apo ki bameh nechshav. Who? What is he worth? But we understand the pasuk to mean al tikri bameh. Don't have what is he worth. Elabama. It's referring to an altar. And the Gemara continues, Ma yad liyad lo yinake. What does the pasuk mean when it continues and goes on to say, hand to hand, he will not be innocent? That is a continuation of the pasuk we quoted earlier in Mishlei. The full pasuk is To'avas Hashem kol gevalev. It's a to'ev, anybody who's arrogant. Yad liyad lo yinake. So again, what does that mean? Hand to hand, he will not be innocent. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav says, Kol haba leishes ish, anybody who has relations with an eishes ish, with a married woman. Now the Mefarshim take out this line because this pasuk is not talking about adultery. It's talking about arrogance, so what it's really referring to is anyone who is arrogant. Even if that person gave over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu ownership of the heavens and the earth like Avram Avinu did. It says that Avram Avinu, he says, I lifted up my hand up to Hashem, Konei Shamayim V'aretz, who acquires the heavens and the earth. Lo yinaka midina shel Gehenim. Even if he did that, if he's at that level still, he will not be declared innocent from the judgment of Gehenim. But the Gemara says this explanation was difficult to the yeshiva of Rabbi Shela. Ha yad liyad lo yenake yadi miboile. It shouldn't say yad liyad. It should say the same terminology that's employed by Avram Avinu. Harimosi yadi. It should say yadi in the pasuk. Ela amri devei Rabbi Shela. Rather, Rabbi Shela gives a different explanation. They say as follows: Afilu kibel Torah k'Moshe Rabbeinu. What the pasuk means is even if the individual who's arrogant, even if he received the Torah like Moshe Rabbeinu, techsibei miyamino eish das lamo. It says by Moshe Rabbeinu from his right hand. He got the fire of the law, the fire of the Torah, so he received the Torah, even if a person is at that level, but if he's arrogant, lo yinaka midina shel Gehenim, he will not be declared innocent from the judgment of Gehenim. But the Gemara still continues and asks, Kasha leila Rabbi Yochanan, this explanation was difficult to Rabbi Yochanan, ha yad liyad, yad miyad miboile. If it's a comparison to Moshe Rabbeinu, it shouldn't say yad liyad, it should say yad miyad. Ela amar Rabbi Yochanan, rather Rabbi Yochanan says, and Rashi over here explains, Afiluhu k'Moshe, we compare even if he's like Moshe Rabbeinu, shekivel miyad HaKadosh Baruch Hu liyado Torah, it means that he received from the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to his hand the Torah. That's the idea of yad liyad, comparing to Moshe Rabbeinu. But then the Gemara asked, yad miyad miboile. It should have said yad miyad to ha mikrav mekavel mukminale, because we're really saying the pasuk is referring to someone receiving, like Moshe Rabbeinu receiving the Torah, v'lo benosen, not someone who's giving. V'havalei lemichtav yad miyad lo yinake. It should have said yad miyad lo yinake, yad shekib miyad, meaning a hand that receives from another hand. Afu lo yinake, even such a person will not be innocent. So if it says yad liyad, it does not seem to be a reference to Moshe Rabbeinu, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Hey Amud Aleph.